Just kidding.
Time to sell all those ears.
Time to sell them. Sell off all the stock. The stock, I'm not going to talk about this, although we are going live any second here. In fact, I think we just went live. Hello, everyone. I am here with Dusty Sage from Micechat.com. How lucky are we?
You are very lucky.
So lucky. So Micechat, in case you're not familiar, is the leading Disney theme park and family travel news, information, discussion board, and community. You like that?
You did a good job.
Thank you. Thank you. How are you doing? How are you personally doing? How's your health, family? Everybody safe?
Everybody is safe. You know, everyone out there is having a hard time. We're all just dealing with it in our own ways. And the way we've chosen to deal with it is just to dive into more of what we already do, which is write about Disney. We're also producing videos, doing some podcasting. We're reaching out to new authors to try and give them a home to write through all of this. So that's how we're surviving.
Yeah. So that was going to be my next question was, okay, so if all the amusement parks are closed and it's a website based on amusement parks, what it's kind of like, where have you found a new lane?
So it's tough, right? Our most popular article of the week every week is our Monday Disneyland update. And
love that. Never miss it.
Yeah, people start their weeks that way. So they go to the office and they check their mail really quick, and then they read Micechat until it's lunchtime, right? So it's hard because we can't go to the parks and take pictures for people, but we'll have a pulse on the news. So we're still bringing people daily information on what's happening with the theme parks, layoffs for the employees, and Bob Iger and Chapin, what they're doing to save the company. How Disney has been taking loans and putting consumer debt out there so that they can survive this downturn. And there's all sorts of things that we've been talking about. So we have periodically been having record day traffic where we're putting news out and people are home, so they're looking for something. And they want to know what's going to happen to their theme parks. And so we'll have these big booms where the traffic is so high that we have to pay for extra bandwidth.
Wow.
It's hard for us because we're not making money during this time. All the advertisers are closing up shop and not, paying for advertisements right now. So we're having higher expenses than we've ever had, but our revenue is lower than it's ever been. So it's it's a double-edged sword. We're happy to be here for everyone, and we're happy that they're choosing us to be a place of finding their information and being entertained while they're stuck at home. But we're personally struggling to pay for it all. So it's been hard.
That makes a lot of sense, because as you're talking about it, I'm thinking, if I'm an advertiser, I don't really want to right now because I got probably 2 or 3 months before people even think about it. And then if I'm a consumer like myself, I still check Micechat pretty often because I want to know what's happening, what's new. Yeah.
Instead of just checking the site once a day, as they may have in the past, people are living on the site all day long now. And instead of doing 1 to 3 articles a day, we're doing 3 to 5 articles a day. So we've dramatically increased our content. So it's interesting. I think we're going to do something pretty similar to what Disney is doing. And Disney has secured a whole bunch of credit, essentially. I think they have $17 billion in potential credit lined up from Wells Fargo and other banks so that they can continue to pay their bills through this downturn, knowing that things will eventually return. And we're going to do something very similar. Instead of in the billions, we'll do it in the thousands. But we'll definitely have to put a lot of the site on credit cards here for the next few months.
Yeah. By the way, if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, share it onto your own pages to help kind of this live interview get out there for whatever what can happen out there. And maybe you can support Micechat. So why aren't the travel agencies and whoever's the advertisers, or maybe they are, sort of think about a future plan where you can book far in advance, stuff like that? Is any of that kind of stuff happening?
So I'm glad you asked this question, as I really care a lot about we have two types of revenue streams. We have our close sponsors that directly sponsor the website. And then there are just the advertisers that we don't know that come through, Google and all of that. And they're very similar in some ways. Our closest sponsors are hotels and restaurants in the Disneyland area and a couple of travel agencies. All of them are suffering the worst crisis of their existence.
Yeah.
The hotels have all mostly shut down, with the exception of one, and they have like a couple of people staying there in this gigantic property. Of course, the restaurants are all shut down or losing money to stay open. And the travel agencies are taking calls all day long, every day in record numbers, but every one of those calls is somebody canceling.
Oh,
So they're paying money for their staff to answer phones so that they can lose money.
right.
And that is such a horrible position for all of them to be in that, of course, I told all of them almost immediately, don't worry about paying Micechat. We're here to help you and support you in this difficult time, but don't think about paying us until you recover.
Yeah.
And it could be, many months. We're now looking into a pretty extended time frame for the theme parks. So that's true of our direct sponsors. Now, if you look on the Google side, just the random advertisers who would advertise on a site like Micechat, the companies that target Micechat are theme parks, hotels, travel companies, airlines, and all of them are suffering. So the vertical we're in, which is essentially entertainment and travel, is just decimated right now.
Yeah.
And we are lucky to still be here. I mean, we're vibrant, we're operating, we're producing more content than ever. I mean, it looks like things are great for Micechat, and they are in some respects. But on the revenue side, there's just no way for us to make money because the channels that we make money in are suffering.
Yeah.
So we may reach out at some point to our readers and ask them, if you love the site, just support us directly. But we don't expect that people are really going to be able to do that. So many people have lost their jobs. A lot of the people that read us are also in the industry, and almost all of them have been furloughed or flat out fired in the last month. So we hate to burden others when they're also hurting so much.
Yeah, it's super challenging. Do you have a YouTube Patreon type site or anything like that?
We don't. And, we've always just relied on our direct advertising model. Once in a blue moon, we've reached out to our users when we've been upgrading the site and asked them to, drop us a PayPal payment or something like that. But I'm really reluctant to do that. It just feels wrong to be asking for a handout at a time when everybody's hurting. So everybody's going through.
Well, we've jumped into the second part of my interview. The first part, I have some questions about the amusement parks, but just one final thing on this. Do you think these restaurants, hotels are, I just read your article today that we're looking at maybe into summer. You think these things are going to go under, and what does that look like? A lot of them can't be like Disney and just borrow, right? So they don't survive.
I was just on with CBS, and that was the whole point of their call to me, was to find out, when are the parks going to open, and could some theme parks fail? While I'm not sure that the theme parks are all in that much jeopardy, definitely there are hotels and restaurants in the Disneyland area that will likely fail, perhaps a good number of them. Also, downtown Disney tenants, that is very high rent, and they've been out of business now for a month. And when the parks reopen, it's likely that there will be an initial rush of pass holders to get in and see Disneyland, and then things will probably drop off rapidly as people realize that there's still virus out there. Tourists aren't coming in. They're not staying in hotels. They're the ones most likely to shop in downtown Disney. And we might see some of those stores start closing up.
Yeah,
some of them may close before they ever reopen, just knowing the situation, because not all of them were all that financially stable to begin with. So we do think there's going to be some problem there. On the theme park front, Disney and Universal in particular are backed by corporations that do a lot more than theme parks.
Right.
So they will both survive, no
Right.
question about it. In fact, they might
They'll
even
probably,
thrive.
I think what you're about to say, they'll probably be the buyers of those hotels going out. That's what I'm thinking.
Disney is always looking for new space, and they own a gigantic piece of property that's called the Toy Story parking lot that is actually slated to be their third park. So
Right.
at some point in the future, it will become a whole theme park. Now that's completely off the table right now in this economic environment, but it's a parking lot, the most expensive parking lot in all of Anaheim, because the amount of money they had to pay for it was huge.
Yeah.
And they didn't just buy it to park people. But there's a lot of land between Disneyland and that parking lot that Disney does not own. And it would be really helpful to them to own that land so they could directly connect that lot with the resort without having to put people on a bus or
Right.
have them walk long distances. So it could very well be that Disney picks up Garden Walk or a hotel or two between Garden Walk and the parking lot. So that would be something that we could keep our eyes on.
Yeah.
But above
I mean,
and beyond that, you have to start wondering about gigantic properties that SeaWorld owns. They're in huge financial trouble right now. It is so expensive to run that park while closed because all of the animals have to be fed and maintained, and they need keepers, and they need doctors, and they need people just to maintain the tanks themselves.
wow.
And those
Yeah.
aquariums are tremendously expensive to run because they have huge filtration systems. So just the power and maintenance required is just, it's massive. And they have
Yeah.
no money coming in. And they have furloughed 90% of their employees company-wide, including executives and management. But they own a lot of property in California and Florida. And I could see somebody buying SeaWorld out before this is all over. Universal may want to expand into that space, or you might see a company like Six Flags or Cedar Fair enter the Orlando market by buying out SeaWorld and then changing it from an aquatic park to theme park or just
Yeah.
a park.
Or like Discovery Kingdom where they have a little bit of both, right?
That's right. So we could see something like that happen. And then I worry about the stability of a Six Flags, which has never been truly profitable. They just kind of maintain themselves by building new rides, and people come
Yeah.
in and they have to quickly build another ride to get more
Right.
people in it. They're trapped in this cycle of building, but they're not going to have the money to do that in the immediate aftermath of this crisis we're in. So we could see something happen with either a Cedar Fair or a Six Flags or both. They could possibly merge or be bought out by the people who own Dollywood, which is Herschend Entertainment. There are so many moving variables, but the companies that seem strongest to me are the ones that have diversified business models. So
Yeah.
Disney and Universal in particular are the most diversified.
Yeah. I mean that Magic Mountain what is that? That land is worth more than the park that sits on it, is the way I think they've said it for many, many years.
That's right. In fact, they have considered in the past selling it off to be a housing development.
Exactly.
So
Then they
it,
just move the rides.
and that's true of the entire Six Flags chain. They own some of their properties. They could sell those to make money. And then the others they rent. I mean, those could possibly be shut down
Right.
if nobody, wants them. But who's going to have the money to buy in this climate? So Disney's losing so much money right now. Now would not be a good time for them to buy anything. They're still just trying to pay off their Fox merger, and they're losing so much money every day on the parks and the Disney stores, and the theaters are all shut. So even their movie division that would normally make them money, they can't release new movies right now. There's nowhere to show them. So Disney's not in a position to buy. They're just trying to survive. Universal might be able to buy something, but the companies out there right now with money are not the ones you'd think of. And it's like Apple and Google, and these companies are sitting on huge cash reserves, and they could at 40 to 50% off buy Disney.
Right.
They could certainly afford to buy some of the smaller theme park enterprises like SeaWorld. So if they really wanted to enter the theme park market, now would be the time for a company with huge cash reserves to do that And we may see that happen.
That is fascinating stuff. It's crazy. It's fascinating and it's crazy. So we'll be watching all of that. Yeah, my first thought was Disney's going to pick up all these hotels that they've been eyeing for so long with their ramp over to their other piece that's behind the hotels, and then go into Toy Story. The third park has been talked about forever, but until those hotels get out of the way, they've kind of been on hold. So who knows what could happen through this. At the same time, what you're saying, everything's being delayed. So like Avengers Campus is being moved, all of that. What's the latest in these fun things that were coming? Avengers, the Black Panther ride, all the stuff that was coming. What's been eliminated or just postponed to who knows when?
So the good news is that no official decisions have been made on canceling anything. And sorry if you hear a weird noise in the background, that's my cat vomiting.
I can't
So life goes on, folks. I have something to deal with when this video is over. That's awesome. But the Avengers Campus will continue as originally planned. It's just going to be pushed off by at least the number of days that the parks have been closed. There is a chance that they may be able to get some construction crews started before the theme parks open. So if we get to a point where the curve is flattened enough and there's a low enough count of patients in the Orange County area, and they think they can keep construction workers far enough apart from each other, might call some construction workers in to start working on Avengers Campus again. The bad news is that things that are in the future that haven't been started are all going to be stalled indefinitely until they can figure out how quickly the crowds are going to return. So if they think that it's going to take 2 to 4 years to recover, we won't see a phase 2 attraction for Avengers Campus. We won't see that Avengers, Wakanda ride on the Twin Jet happen for a very long time, if ever. Same thing would be true of Star Wars Land and their expansions, because there are all sorts of little projects, including an interactive dinner theater restaurant and things like that, that were really being worked on that might be canceled. We could even see something that's already broken ground canceled, like Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. Those things are not critical to the operating of the resort. And it's more important for the parks to break even and make money than it is to build new things. And I don't think they're going to need to build all of these things to have people come back. They'll need to wait until they need to build more capacity once people start returning. Again, I think that we will see pass holders return initially, but I think that very quickly that will drop off.
And I think if I'm reading, I've probably mostly your stuff, but it's Orlando that really is going to get hit because they had a multi-millions of dollars worth of projects just launched like this year, right?
Yeah, and the two problems Orlando has is their parks are all huge, the massive amounts of property to maintain. So Disney World costs so much more for Disney to maintain than Disneyland. And the numbers of people that visit the Magic Kingdom in a day and Disneyland in a day, just those two parks, is fairly similar. But the amount of money and the number of cast members it takes to run the two is very different because it takes so many more in Florida. And they have so many more hotels and they have roadways and they have an amount of land that's similar to Manhattan, if you can imagine that.
And they just bought more, I think.
Yeah, Disney World is the size of an average American city. And they did just buy a little tiny bit of land over there by Magic Kingdom right at the beginning of this crisis. So that is something to keep in mind, just how difficult it will be for Florida in particular compared to Disneyland. And I got a little off track there, so I forgot the question.
I know. Well, you touched on one I wanted to go on because most people think the parks are closed. Now they can build everything really fast and they can clean and do all the stuff they need to do, but that's not how it works, right? Because they're all on quarantine as well.
At Disneyland, everything is shut down with the exception they have some custodial people, about 5 people that are going into the parks every day, just cleaning and re-cleaning and staying apart from each other. And they have a few maintenance people that come in and they're checking things like refrigerators and pumps and generators and lighting systems and control panels, and they cycle the rides to make sure that they're still functional.
Wow.
Can't just leave a ride sitting forever or they stop working, you know, because they need things to move so that the oil keeps moving around, et cetera. So there's a lot that's still happening in the parks, but not a ton. There's the cat walking behind me right now.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get lucky, folks, and live on Zoom, the cat will throw up on me. Could happen.
So what I think is going to happen, and I'm kind of praying this happens, there's a slow rollout that starts like next week. Probably not, but as soon as possible. So all of a sudden groups of 50 and then groups of 100. And so when can people get in there and start working again?
That's a big question. It won't be necessarily Disney's decision. They'll probably wait for the governor's recommendations on what's safe and not safe and which businesses are allowed to reopen before they start making those decisions on who can come back and start working, even before the public is let in. But I'll give you a clue. Universal hasn't stopped working. They still have people working on their Nintendo World right now. So for whatever reasons, and LA County has far more cases of this virus than Orange County does. And LA County has been far more strict on what people can and can't do than Orange County has. And yet there's this project going on in LA County that's not happening at Disney in Anaheim. So the two companies have taken a very different approach to this. So I think that both Universal, Hollywood, and Orlando are still working on things. And Disney is just maintaining things. So there's no refurbishments going on, but there is just a basic amount of maintenance going on in the park just to keep them clean and ready to go. Gardeners are still watering things. So Disney will be ready to reopen when the time comes, but they've not really worked on the new stuff like Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway or Avengers.
Yeah, or the Tron ride coming to Tomorrowland really soon. I'm just putting it in the universe.
There's some wishful thinking for you. There's definitely a plan to bring the Tron ride to California. I think we can expect that the Tomorrowland redo is just not on the cards at all right now.
Yeah, I'm sure it was, but now could be 2 to 3, maybe longer years away.
Yeah, it could be 10. Could be 10 years away.
Don't say that, Dusty. Come on.
Yeah,
Don't say that.
It's all going to come down to how quickly guests return, how quickly those hotel rooms get filled up to capacity. And Disneyland operated at near total capacity all the time. So their hotel rooms always full. They can charge $500 a night for the Disneyland hotel. That's ridiculous. No hotel is worth $500 a night. I mean, the nicest hotel in America is $500 a night, and those hotel rooms are not great. I mean, they're okay, and they're at Disneyland, but they're getting $500 a night. Think of the premium on that.
Yeah,
and,
that's for a normal room, because you're not even talking about concierge and all that stuff. Like it jumps.
Yeah, that's for a room with a view of the garage.
So,
Disney had it wired. They were charging more for food than anyone, more for merchandise than anyone, more for hotel rooms than anyone. Their ticket prices into the parks cost more than any other theme parks out there. So Disney operates at a premium, and they operate at super high capacity. So they have more people in their theme parks every day than any other theme park enterprise in America. So the Disney parks are the champs, and they charge more for it than anyone. So their profit margin was huge. They were the #1 driver of money for the entire Disney company last year. And now they're making zero money. So it's going to take a long time for them to recover that and pay back their shareholders for what they've been losing. And then they're going to have to wait for that sort of capacity to return before they really feel comfortable building new hotels and new rides.
Do you know if Disney Plus has countered it? Because everyone I know has Disney Plus.
Everyone has Disney Plus. I mean, it's how I'm surviving right now is by watching Disney Plus, but Disney Plus loses money. So Disney Plus isn't slated to start making money for another 4 to 5 years.
Wow.
And they have brought on a whole ton of new customers during this downturn. In fact, just last week, they announced that they have more subscribers than Netflix, if you can imagine. So in less than a year, they've caught up to Netflix. Netflix makes more money than Disney. Netflix loses money still. So the streaming services don't have the kind of deep revenue that Disney is used to. It is a way to get their content out to people, but at the cheap $7 a month or whatever it costs for Disney Plus, it doesn't come close to paying all of the actors and producers and people that it takes to produce a piece of content. So, and they don't have ads on it the way ABC television does. So ABC makes Disney money. Disney Plus loses Disney money.
But most of that content they already had. How can it lose money?
Well, a lot of their content is new, like The Mandalorian, which costs as much to make per minute as a film on in the movies.
Okay.
So a lot of their new content that they're creating is very expensive. It's the reason why Netflix doesn't really make money. You know, yeah, you can make money by rebroadcasting old things, but it's the new things that bring people in. So
True.
a lot of people subscribed to Disney Plus, not so much for the back catalog as for The Mandalorian.
Yeah,
And the new
that's why I
stuff.
did it. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, so, and that cost them money. And the old stuff cost them money too, because they still have to pay royalties to people. And there are a lot of really complex agreements that Disney's made over the years. So they can't just put Winnie the Pooh on the air without getting the rights, you know, from certain people agreements to be
Yeah.
able to stream it. Because streaming wasn't a concept that people had when a lot of these contracts were made. So they have to go back and they have to negotiate new contracts and they have to pay people money. And so it's a lot of money just to put old things on the air as well.
Wow, that's so interesting. So when you were talking about the parks and all that, I had a question. I don't know if it's fair for Disney and because people would be in an uproar, but what about they're running these rides anyway? If there's a small amount of people allowed in, do you think they'll do some kind of like what's that, for the uber wealthy to rent the park kind of stuff? You think they'll do stuff like that?
Somebody was just talking to me the other day and they said, well, if it's only safe to have 5,000 people in the park,
Right.
could they charge $500 per person and let them in? And I don't think we'll see Disney do that.
Because the backlash will be so bad, right?
It would. And they've sold annual passes to people and park tickets to people that are just sitting in their pockets and waiting to be used. And I think there would be lawsuits, quite frankly. So I think the bigger problem is going to be when they do reopen, they will likely be forced into lower capacity anyway.
Right.
Just in order for people to keep safe distance from each other, you won't be able to have 50,000 people in the park. You could maybe have 20,000, maybe 25,000. So if they're telling restaurants when they reopen that they have to be at half the capacity that they previously were, I think we can guess that something similar will happen to the theme parks. Half capacity for Disneyland would be about 25,000 people, 20 to 25,000, and much less for California Adventure. Maybe they could get 10 to 15,000 people. So can they make money at that? With all of the cast members it takes to run it and all the extra cast members it's going to take to keep it clean. So every person gets off of a ride, they're going to have somebody quickly wipe down the handlebars and the seat belts the minute they get off the ride before the next person can get on. So rides will be running slower. There'll be more people that it takes to run them. And I think they're going to have a staffing increase in certain areas, more custodial. All of that will have to increase while the guest count decreases. So I think it's going to be a tough go for Disney, and I don't think they can charge extra for it.
Yeah. In fact, I was thinking they would go the other way, but I didn't really calculate the differences. So you have all these new things, including, haven't they even been talking about what they have in Shanghai where they can measure your temperatures or walking in, those kinds of scanners and stuff? Like what's all the differences? You just said a bunch of them that we can expect when we go back to these parks.
Well, we'll definitely expect to see temperature checks. And just to be clear, because I can hear everyone screaming out there, temperature checks don't really solve the problem. Because a lot of people are asymptomatic before they, exhibit the symptoms of this disease, and they may not have a temperature yet, but they're still transmitting it to people. However, it does stop the people who do actively have it from getting in, and so it reduces the risk somewhat. So they definitely want to do that. I think that guests would be concerned if they weren't doing it. They're already checking your bags for knives and guns when you walk in.
Right.
The temperature check, what's that? What difference does that matter? Let them do it. It's the other stuff that's going to happen that's going to have a bigger impact on your park experience. And what's the first thing a child does when they see their favorite character? They run right up and hug that character,
Right.
potentially transmitting a virus to the outfit and fur of that character. And then the next child goes and hugs that character. So we're not going to see characters. We're not going to see them in places that people can touch them, at least. So probably no more princess meet and greets for a while, no walk around characters for a while. Places where people congregate in mass numbers, like think of the Frozen show at California Adventure. You had over 1,000 people in a theater sitting shoulder to shoulder for 1 hour. No bathroom nearby, anything like that. So things like that might stop for a while. They'll probably want to mitigate the cost of the theme park experience. So I think we'll see the marching band and the Dapper Dans, and entertainment will likely go away. We may not even see things like fireworks and Fantasmic for a while, where people congregate, push in on Main Street USA, because it's just too hard to convince a guest to do the right thing. And there are a lot of people out there that still deny that this is all real. And we write an article on Micechat, and we put the link to the article up on Facebook, and immediately a certain proportion, maybe 20% of the people say, why? You know, there's fewer people have died of this than the flu and this and that. They don't get the big picture that people are dying at a much higher rate with this illness than the regular flu. It's much more contagious than the regular flu. And if people catch it at Disneyland, Disney becomes liable at some point. So if it's deemed that the parks are unsafe and you go there and you catch this disease that then kills your pregnant wife or your child or your grandmother, they're going to want to take vengeance on Disney and sue them. And they could possibly win if Disney knows the risk and still stays open. So that's the real problem that we're looking at. And if Disney does reopen, they do so at their own risk, and they have to take incredible measures to make the parks as safe as possible. And they have to go bend over backwards to make sure guests understand that it may be dangerous for you to go. So they will likely have people signing waivers and, you know, signs up everywhere. You enter at your own risk and please do not touch anything. And they'll have to have all of that very well documented for the inevitable lawsuits.
That is such an impossible situation.
It is.
It already takes a long time to go from the parking lot to actually get into Disneyland. Like, it's frustrating. I can't imagine signing waivers, having a temperature check station, and then the amount of people being blocked. I'm sure the system would be, you'll have to sign up for the day you want to go, just like you did for the new pass they have, Disney Pass Plus. What's that one called?
The Flex Pass.
The Flex
and
Pass.
For the opening of Galaxy's Edge, for the first month, you had to book online and pick a time. So there was a specific time. And I do think we will see that happen. I think at least at first, the smart way for Disney to handle it would simply be to have people buy all their tickets and schedule their annual pass visits online. And then there would be a time that you would arrive. They wouldn't obviously want everyone arriving at 8 a.m. so that they can try to get their Rise of the Resistance pass.
Right. Oh my goodness.
The most dangerous thing that could happen is to have everybody pushed around the front gate and then lingering in town square to get their pass before they're let into the park. So they would likely put all of that online and then have you book that. So first you would have to book your day. Okay, I got my day. And then it would open up a window for you to book maybe 3 fast passes, including Rise of the Resistance. And they might do it almost exactly like Florida handles their Fast Pass Plus. So it's booked well in advance. You get to pick 3 things. They're from 2 different tiers of rides. So there are some e-tickets in one pool. There are some, you know, middle range rides in another pool, so that you're not just booking e-tickets. And that is probably the safest way to do it, and also helps keep the lines lower. So we might see some standby lines go away, particularly the standby lines that are very tight switchbacks.
Right.
So rides like Indy are easier because it's a single file line. You can just tell people keep your distance from the party in front of you. But switchback type of rides will be very hard.
Man, this is it. It just opens up can of worms, and it just keeps going. That's why I guess it's true. I mean, Disney's going to survive, but a lot of the other ones may not, because That's too
Yep.
much.
And you're right, it's a can of worms. And the deeper you go into, well, think of all the things where there are touch points that would be a problem. A
Right.
big one is buffets and self-serve. You know, you go into Plaza Inn or to Pizza Port,
Right.
and you're picking up your own salad. Well, sometimes people pick that salad up and they look at it, they're like, oh, this one looks wilted, and they put it back and they
Let's not,
grab the next one. I mean, right? Or
yeah,
somebody's walking down a buffet line and they sneeze.
yeah. Let's not
And
talk
so
about that.
we're going to see big changes there. We'll see plexiglass all the way down to the counter so people can't touch the food. Cast members will have to hand it over to you. We might see buffets turned into table service.
Mm.
So we will see a lot of things change. You won't want people to grab their own silverware. It's impossible to pick out one fork, right? You inevitably touch
Oh man.
another few
Yeah.
forks while you're reaching in to grab yours.
I purposely do just for fun. I mean,
Yeah, just to spread your germs around. So we'll see all of that change. They'll hand you a tray and it'll already have a napkin and a fork and a spoon and a knife on it.
it,
And
we
we're
gotta
like,
pray that a cure comes fast because it is. I was already debating as an annual pass holder, like, do I just because I one of the options is you can stop and just quit and then you wait through all this is over. But man, if a lot of people do it, I don't know what Disney does, right?
I think Disney won't mind losing some pass holders.
Yeah.
One of their biggest worries right now is that 1 million+ pass holders all try to show up at the same time.
Right.
That is their number one fear, is that everybody wants to say they were the first one back in the park when it reopened. And if that happens, the parks will get shut down and we will lose them again for another couple months.
Yeah.
So we really hope that a lot of people do cancel and that Disney puts people on a very strict plan for getting in. So booking online, like we talked about, that'll be the only way they can keep that catastrophe from happening, because opening day, it could be a record day for them. And if that happened, city officials would come in and shut them down.
How do you do that though when you've paid a certain amount of money? Do you think they're gonna like tier that out and change the what you paid?
Possibly. So they might make a temporary extension on how long everyone's pass is during that period when it's difficult to get in. You would only be able to book a day that you would normally have access to. So the signature passes would be able to book, you know, almost any day they wanted, up to 3 months in advance, let's say. And the lower passes would only be able to book weekdays, and they'd see what happens. But if a lot of people are not being able to get in that wanted to get in, they might just have to add additional months to kind of make it up to people that we realize you're having trouble. They might do it as a lottery system. So everybody that wants that day puts their name in, and then you get notified that you and a certain number of guests can go on a certain day. Don't know yet, but there are certainly a lot of options for them to be able to meter it out, but they'll have to do something like that, because the risk of having tens of thousands of people show up on opening day when the virus risk is still highest,
Right.
would be negligence on Disney's part. So they'll have to do something.
Man, so I know you just did CNN and you have like NBC after this, and so I'll try and wrap it up here. But I could talk about this stuff forever, as you know, we've talked before. I wanted to end a little bit with you. What you do Micechat. How long you been doing it?
So I'm going on about 20 years
20
longer
years.
of Disney blogging.
I love
It's
reading it.
crazy for me.
I
Go
think
ahead.
it's awesome what you're doing. And so I wanted to ask you, what was like your favorite experience in all the time of doing Micechat or whatever?
I'll tell you, there's been so many. We've done so many events to the Gumball Rally and having hundreds of people show up to run through the parks to see who can ride the most rides in a single day. That has been so rewarding for me, and getting to know those people. We've been doing that for almost 15 years. So sometimes I'll see these people and I'll only see them at Gumball Rally. And some of these people, it's the one trip they make a year, and they come from Alaska and Australia and all over the world to do this event. And it's so rewarding. Having people show up to the Sunday meets at noon that we've been doing for 20 some odd years, getting to meet people. It's their first visit to Disneyland, people who are ill and they're making one final trip to Disneyland. So many ups and downs, and I've been best man in weddings of people who met on Micechat and then become godfather to Micechat babies,
Wow.
people who have met on Micechat and then had families. I mean, it's just been, when you've done something as long as I have, it becomes a way of life. And that's really, I think it's the people, the cast members I've met and the readers that I've met and that have become friends and family to me, that is the most rewarding thing. And Disneyland is the place where it all happens. So some people go to Disneyland to ride the rides. I go to Disneyland for the friendships, and it's like my home. It's like my hometown.
Yeah, and I think that's what people don't understand. I live in a whole nother world. It's a ministry world and church world and stuff. And when I talk about Disneyland, they're like, why would you want to go there with the lines and the difficulty and the money? And I go, it's really not for the rides. There's just a experience and something that happens in my heart that jumps, and nostalgia. I've been there my entire life. My parents took me. The moments that I've had with my kids, it's like my backyard, and I like to go in my backyard and be there. It doesn't, I don't need to ride Mr. Toad's Wild Ride again. I've ridden it 100,000 times, but I probably will ride it again. I can't wait to ride it with my kids. It's just, I guess some people just don't quite understand that, and then others really get it.
Yeah, and it's a safe place to be. So I know so many people who at times of strife, they lose a family member or they lost their job,
Mm,
and they don't know what to do, and they're feeling this great sadness and anxiety, and they go to Disneyland.
yeah.
And they do that because Disneyland is one of the best drugs there is. It's a little dose of happiness,
Yeah.
and times it's a whole lot of safety and security, and things just operate like clockwork in a certain way at Disneyland. So when other parts of your life are falling apart, Disneyland is steady. And
Yeah.
it's a lot like the church in a lot of ways. In fact, we used to do our Sunday meetups every Sunday at noon. And some people started calling it the Church of Walt, because it really was that sort of almost religious experience where we were coming and meeting up next to the Walt Disney statue. And we were checking in on everybody. How was your week? How are you? And we'd go off and eat lunch together. And it was a very communal, spiritual sort of a situation. And
Yeah.
Disney has that effect on people, I think. It's a
Yeah.
safe ground. And I think a lot of people are missing it right now, in part because these crazy, unsettled times make you really wish you had Disneyland.
Yeah, for sure. Um, All-time favorite ride or experience in the parks for you?
So my all-time gee whiz wow moment was walking through the gateway at Tokyo Disney Sea for the first time.
Okay.
And the overwhelming emotion that it caused that I did not expect. There's a giant hotel that kind of covers the front of the park, and you walk through like a tunnel. It's not unlike going to Disney World and their gigantic train station entry with the big tunnel there. And you walk in, and immediately there's Mount Prometheus, the huge volcano, and this gigantic lagoon in front of it. And the park just kind of sweeps around it, and every inch of it is the most ornate,
Yeah.
incredibly detailed, exquisite colors and I couldn't fathom it. And I realized that my eyes were leaking. I just was so overwhelmed with emotion. And as I went through that park, I came to the realization that humankind has never created a place more expansive and detailed than Tokyo Disney Sea, which is just, it was incredible.
This is why I love you, man. I've had that same experience at that same park. It's just so cool. Now, I haven't been to Disneyland Paris. I've heard it's the most beautiful. You've been there?
Disneyland Paris is fabulous, and I love Disneyland Paris. I have a love-hate relationship with Disneyland Paris because for its size and its beauty, there's not a lot of there. It feels like it needs a lot more than it has. What it has is gorgeous, and Tony Baxter and the Imagineers did such a great job with that park, really taking the Disneyland model and saying, if Walt Disney had had unlimited money, what would he have done different with Disneyland?
Yeah.
And they did those things. So creating arcades behind Main Street so that on rainy days, people can walk up and down the street without getting wet or cold in the middle of winter. And uh, building a bigger frontier land that had room for theaters, and building theaters in a way that parades can go through the front of the theater so people can sit in the stands and watch the parades from theaters that show other shows at other parts of the day.
Wow.
Just lots of really amazing things. Putting a cavern underneath the castle with a dragon in it, an animatronic dragon. Having a restaurant that was originally built for the upper part of the castle. It's just a lot of really wonderful ideas for that park. And then they built a second park next to it, which is the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
And it was, what would Walt Disney never have allowed to be built
Right.
if he had a budget of nothing? And they built the saddest excuse for a theme park ever, right next to their most beautiful theme park. And it drives me nuts.
I didn't know any of that until the Imagineering story on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, because I never understood why they would do that until I realized they had to build it to save that land. Otherwise, they lose the land.
Yes.
And it's just fascinating stuff.
Yeah. In fact, they just did a third expansion at Disneyland Paris, another lackluster expansion to not lose another parcel of land. They built something called Disney Nature, and it's essentially a small water park on a fake geothermal pool and some gardens around it. And it was just enough that they can convince the government to allow them to keep that land.
When was this?
It's recent, last couple of years.
Yeah, I haven't even heard that one. That's so, I guess that makes sense. You're just trying to save the land.
Right.
But saying it's a park, or maybe they did. Did they say this is another like gate?
Yeah, they do kind of consider it a park, and they call it Disney Nature, and you can stay there. All the accommodations are very earth friendly, and there are solar panels and geothermal, and they planted gardens on the rooftops, and they have a bakery and a dairy there. It's very interesting. Hilarious. It is an interesting place.
Do you use it at least a lot cheaper?
You know, it's the most expensive to go to Disney in America. You can stay in Disneyland, Paris, surprisingly, Tokyo, Disneyland area hotels that are right on their monorail path, some non-Disney owned hotels that are still on the monorail circuit that are very affordable. And it's cheaper to go into the parks everywhere else in the world, except in the US. So Disneyland is the most expensive, then Disney World, and then the foreign parks are, quite affordable. So when things recover and the cruise lines and the hotels and everybody are just desperate to have you visit, you'll find that the hotels at Disneyland and Disney World are still the most expensive by far, because they're going to be reluctant to lower rates because they'll be afraid they won't be able to raise them again. Whereas in the foreign parks and the hotels not owned by Disney in those foreign parks, the rates will be next to nothing. And you'll be able to get a cheap airfare, and you'll be able to get cheap hotel rooms, and the parks were already cheaper. So it may be more cost effective for you to go visit Tokyo Disneyland or Disneyland Paris than it will be for you to go to Disney World.
And the airlines will probably be cheaper too.
Mm-hmm. In fact, just before everything shut down, I had thought about, we knew that closures were coming at that point, but they hadn't really taken over everywhere. Disney's Alani was still open, and I'm a vacation club member, and I own there at Alani, and I thought, airfare is $130 per person to Hawaii right now. It was at that time, which is just unheard of, right? You could easily spend $1,000 to go to Hawaii. It was $130, and I thought, this is where I'm going to shelter in place.
Yeah.
Before things change and I can't get in or out of California, I'm going to go to Hawaii, where they can cordon off the whole island and keep people safer. And I'll stay in the lap of luxury at Disney's Alani. And if they keep us all from leaving Hawaii, I'll just get to stay there for the months that the park is closed, or that the California is closed. And I was so wrong. I'm glad I didn't go because they did eventually close Alani and kick everyone out that had reservations. And the same time, the state started making it really hard to get in and out. So I could have just been homeless on the beach in Hawaii.
Yeah,
thank goodness I didn't go, but it was a grand thought there for a while.
It sounded smart until you said you might be homeless on the street. I'm like, why didn't I do that?
You're going to be homeless someplace. Hawaii is the place to do it.
Yeah, if you have to, right?
That's right.
All right, I know you have to go. How can people connect with you, support you, give the websites, all that, spill it all out?
So I'll tell you, the best thing for people to do is to check Micechat every single day. Check it more than once because we're putting up 3 to 5 articles a day. We've had numerous articles already today, interesting stuff. Make sure you go back to yesterday and read Brady's article about the governor's plans for reopening the state and what that means for the theme parks. I think that's a very important article for everyone to read.
Yeah,
Brady is
really
a
good.
reporter from the LA Times and the OC Register, so it's not just us talking. This is a well-respected reporter that we hired to write this article because I didn't want people accusing us of being sensationalists, but it is a very sensational topic.
Yeah.
And it needed to be written correctly, and it was. So go back and read that. And then today he wrote the most incredible article about Imagineering and how they use scents, so how they use smells
I read
to
that.
further shape and fill out your Disney parks experience. And it's
Yeah.
such a fascinating story. We've ran articles after that, news articles about stuff on Disney Plus and what ABC is going to do with some of the holes in its schedule. They have a family sing-along tomorrow. So you can read about all that stuff. And here's how you can help me. Instead of just reading it and then going on to another website, do us the favor of doing 2 things. You enjoyed the article, share it on your Facebook page. Nothing could help us more right now than you sharing our content, because everything has been disrupted and our ability to get to people and share stuff to them has been completely and totally disrupted by all of this news about this pandemic and how news sites are prioritizing that type of content over sort of fluff type things like Disney Parks news. So help us out by sharing. And secondly, let the authors know that you appreciate them. So leave a comment. And we're not really able to pay them like we did before. So our authors get paid, and they get paid a share of what we make every day. So the largest portion of what comes into Micechat goes right back out to the authors who are writing the content. But because we're not really making anything right now, they're not really making anything right now. So the way that we pay them is by thanking them for their work. And we really need everyone out there to leave a comment and let them know you agree or you disagree or you have another idea or it made you think about something else. And if you do that, you're doing the Lord's work in really thanking these people for their efforts, because they don't need to do this for us. They're doing it because they love Disney and they love you all. So share their works and comment.
Good stuff. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking this time. Hold on while I turn everything off because I'm going to say bye.